Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts. MMA Creative Vice President, Democratic Operative Mike Kopp, and heard on 1510 WLAC syndicated talk show host Steve Gill. Welcome, gentlemen. We saw the poll numbers on tenure, and Tennesseans not real happy with tenure. About 54% opposed it. The governor wants some changes done to it. It looks like that's going to happen. It looks like there are going to be some new requirements for tenure to happen here in Tennessee.
Good.
I'm going to say at the outset, I'm not a very big fan of the MTSU poll. I haven't looked in the details on this one. I've looked in great detail at their previous polls. They poll randomly. They don't poll registered voters or likely voters and then try to extrapolate
it's a phone survey.
That this has some relevance to the political arena. They overpolled Democrats. I mean, they had the CBS poll this week that was being touted that it overpolled Democrats to Republicans by over 10%, had double polled union households versus the national. So, I mean, I think this stuff is interesting, but I think in terms of political application, it's completely irrelevant.
But tenure is going to be addressed.
It will be addressed.
It is going
the
to be.
The issues are relevant.
Right.
I just think this poll doesn't give us any real insight into what Tennesseans think.
I think the undercurrent in all this is the issue of accountability. I think a lot of people in the public believe that government employees, whether you're teachers or whatever, should be held accountable. And I think tenure is one of those that kind of falls in that gray area of if you're allowing somebody to sort of hold on to this title and benefits, do they really deserve it? Is there enough accountability to justify it? And I think that's why it's probably one of the safest places for the governor to go and the legislature to go first. But I think there, as I think we've seen this week, is I think there's even Republican legislators that are thinking maybe they don't want to go too far on this thing. Because at the end of the day, teachers are still the people that take care of your children every day. And I think there's still, even though there's the issue of accountability, there's still an undercurrent of sentiment that people feel close to their teacher and feel like their teacher is somebody that want to protect to a certain degree. So I think it's a tough one to try to deal with.
It is a moving target, and I think this poll was actually taken a couple of weeks ago before we've seen some of the most outrageous, vile behavior in the Wisconsin protest that I think, frankly, is causing some pushback. I think most people feel like the teacher in my kid's classroom is good, but my gosh, if what we're seeing in Wisconsin is what teachers are, we need to be reining in and getting rid of the bad ones. And I think you're going to see this as kind of a moving target that's very emotional on both sides of the aisle.
On Tennessee's Capitol Hill, collective bargaining is still a hot topic down there. We're now seeing, finally, some movement by the governor, Speaker Beth Harwell, quietly behind the scenes. It looks like now, because of their input, collective bargaining may not be totally done away with, but there will be some changes to it. At least that's the push going on.
Well, I think it gets back to what I was saying before. I think there is an opportunity for the Republicans to seize the moment and to try to get some concessions from teacher groups and other groups like that. But if they push too far and people get a sense that they're taking away a teacher's right to be heard, which is the ultimate underbelly of collective bargaining, then I think they're going to run into some problems, and I'm sure their polling is showing that.
I think part of the problem is if it's the teacher right to be heard, but not to the extent that the taxpayer is raped in the system. And I think what we've seen in some of these states, maybe not as much in Tennessee, but certainly in these other places where we want to avoid going, is they're literally in bankruptcy. They are hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in the hole because of the pension accounts, because of the promises that have been made with never having to be accountable to it by the legislators. We don't want to go down that path. You want to fix that now rather than being like they are in California, New York, Wisconsin, and other places.
We saw on the Sharia law aspect the new proposal down there. We heard from Senator Ketron this week. He's talking about saying this is not anti-religion. This actually protects Islam. This is anti-terrorist. Those Muslims here in Tennessee don't agree. They say that this is a violation of their religious freedoms.
I think, again, this is one of those quick fringe issues where Bill Ketron and other Republicans might get a few brownie points with some of the more conservative wing of their party. But ultimately, it is an invasion of religious freedoms, and I think people are a little confused about that and wondering why legislators are wanting to go down this path instead of dealing with the economy and jobs, which is really what matters to people in their pocketbooks.
I think the confusion is that this is not about religious freedom. What we want to avoid in our state and I think in our country is what we're seeing play out in Europe, where you've got these radical Muslim imams from the mosques preaching sedition, preaching violence, preaching the imposition of Sharia law, which is different than the worship of Islam. And when you're imposing a religious setting, an autocracy, a theocracy, which again we're seeing play out in Europe, we don't want that coming here, where you've got an imam saying, you know, we're going to proselytize terrorism. We're going to promote terrorism from our mosque. We may not have that happening a lot that we know of here, but we have seen incidences where a Major Malik Nidal Hassan is out killing people in this country, coming from a mosque in Washington, D.C., where the imam has now fled out of this country and is one of the top terrorists wanted in the world. We don't want that here in Tennessee. I think this is to address the radical proselytizing of Sharia law, not the preaching of Islam.
The Muslims don't see it that way. You're exactly right. That's what Senator Ketron says is the whole gist of his bill. I guess the question is there a way to bring those two sides together to get to that point?
I'm not sure there is. I mean, I think it's so gray. I don't know where you draw the line. I mean, just this week we had the Supreme Court rule on whether or not people have the right to protest at the military funerals. You know, what they're saying is vile, what they're saying is horrific, but they still have the right to say what they want to say. And I think that's one of those things where that's a gray area, and if government starts trying to draw lines around it, they're never going to get a consensus on it.
I don't think it's a gray area when you move into promoting violence, preaching violence, and in the Supreme Court, unanimously, our Supreme Court has also ruled that, for example, Mormons couldn't overturn U.S. law by promoting multiple wives. Also, we shouldn't have Muslims promoting murder, violence, and overturning the U.S. Constitution under the guise of Sharia law. We've got a guy coming on Monday on our show, an imam from London, Chowdhury, who is one of those pushing for Sharia to be imposed on America. He shouldn't be preaching in mosques in this country because that goes beyond simply preaching the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sirah to promoting violence, promoting Sharia. That's what Ketron's
30 seconds to go. Were you surprised by the Supreme Court ruling? A lot of people will be upset by this. I think it was the correct ruling and a brave ruling.
It's the right legal ruling. It's morally indefensible.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
I think everybody agrees with that. What these folks do at these funerals is just so vile. But the court got it right under the Constitution. They have the right to do it.
You can't regulate that. Government shouldn't try to.
Mike Kopp, Steve Gill, appreciate your time and your insight. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment.